I told you we don't serve drifters here. The sharp crash of a shattered plate rang out like a slap across the somber diner. The steam from the spilled food still hung in the air when Emily Carter stepped forward, shielding the frail, trembling man. Her soaked apron clung to her like a thin shield against the storm of judgment. No one dared to look, though everyone heard. The rain pelted against the windows. A sigh. A silence. All of it curled into a single, breathless moment that no one dared interrupt. She reached into her pocket. Then take it out of my tip. But that wasn't enough. You're fired. Get out. The next morning, just as the sun peeked through the clouds, 200 uniformed soldiers stood silently outside that very diner. They weren't there for coffee. They were there for her. In Ashbrook, Ohio, a town where every faded storefront seemed to whisper stories of fading hopes, Emily was known simply as the waitress at Dawson's Diner. Some called her the quiet girl. Others, the one who never complained. Each morning, long before sunrise, Emily arrived wiping down counters, brewing coffee, lining up muffins like clockwork. Regulars said she was gentle as a cup of hot tea. The cook grumbled that she was too soft for her good. But few knew that each night after the long, silent shift, Emily returned to a small rented room behind a mechanic shop. There, she curled up beside Muffin, her one-eyed cat, and reached beneath her pillow for an old military ID card tucked in a worn silver tin. Emily Carter, 31, was raised by her grandfather, Henry Carter, a Vietnam War veteran man who carried the war in his eyes and his voice. He wasn't the warm, friendly type, quiet, stern, but when he told stories, his voice lowered, like he was speaking to ghosts only he could see. Honor isn't loud, he would say, lifting his mug with a hand worn thick with calluses. It's what you do when no one's clapping. It's sweeping the porch before a party, even when you know no one's coming. After her parents disappeared, swept away by mistakes no one spoke of, Henry became her entire world. She grew up in a small wooden house on the town's edge, where the American flag never stopped waving, and every night before bed, she read a veteran's biography pasted on the wall like scripture. Not a single Veterans Day passed without Henry dressing in his faded uniform, placing his hand on his chest, and standing tall as the national anthem crackled through an old radio. Emily never went to college. No fancy degrees. But deep in her soul, her grandfather had sown values the world was beginning to forget. Resilience, integrity, and compassion without recognition. She watched people carefully, the man who always ate alone on Thursdays, the dishwasher with bruises no one asked about, the old man in a threadbare uniform who came in from the cold just asking for hot water. To the town, she was invisible. But to those she'd quietly helped a wrapped sandwich, a clean blanket, a listening gaze, Emily was the guardian of something sacred. They never said it. She never asked. But when that storm rolled in and the old man stood alone in the diner, it was her grandfather's lessons that moved her forward, no hesitation, no agenda. Because honor, as he taught her, never needs an audience. That rainy afternoon didn't let up, as if the sky itself was too weary to hold back its tears. Wind slipped through the cracks of Dawson's Diner's windows, letting the chill seep into Emily's already numb fingers. It was almost 8 p.m. Most of the regulars had gone. Only a few patrons remained, heads down, pretending to be absorbed in things more important than a warm meal. The diner door creaked open. The bell above it gave a faint ring, like a sigh. Emily looked up from the pile of receipts she hadn't finished tallying, and instantly saw him. A lone figure stood unsteadily in the doorway, soaked from head to toe. His faded army coat sagged heavily with rain, its torn hem trailing near his knees. The U.S. Army tag on his chest was barely legible. His beard was patchy, cheeks sunken, and the rain ran through the creases in his weathered face like time itself had cracked him open. One leg limped under a makeshift bandage, yellowed, frayed, barely hanging on. His hands trembled as he clutched a small paper bag, as if it held everything he had left in the world. He didn't look for a table. He searched the room for a pair of eyes willing to let him exist. I'm sorry, he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. I just need a cup of hot water. And if there's maybe some leftover bread? He hesitated, eyes downcast. There was nothing pitiful in his tone-only exhaustion and a dignity worn thin by the storms of life, yet never broken. Emily tightened her grip on the dish rag. Her chest ached. That sentence, almost word for word, was one her grandfather had once shared with her. A night in 1968, lost in the jungles of Vietnam, when he was a young soldier and a local villager gave him a boiled yam and a bowl of warm water. She stepped out from behind the counter, no hesitation, no second thought. "There's a free seat in the corner," she said gently. "Let me bring you something warm." The man shook his head. I have no money. Really, I don't want to cause trouble. That meal was just sent back, still hot," she interrupted with a soft smile. "It would be a waste to toss it. How about some hot coffee too?" He looked at her like he couldn't believe she was real. His eyes shimmered. Emily returned to the kitchen. She found the untouched roast chicken, added cornbread, some green beans, and poured coffee into the cleanest ceramic mug she could find. She wrapped the napkin neatly, placed it all on a tray, and brought it out herself. "Here you go." He ate slowly, as if each bite were a sacred ritual. There was no rush, no desperation, just silent gratitude. When he lifted the mug, his hand still shook. Emily noticed his cracked fingernails, swollen joints, likely untreated arthritis. Age, weather, hardship, and the battlefield dashed into every inch of him. As he neared the last bite, he looked up, eyes damp. You remind me of my wife," he said softly. "She used to say that anyone who's lived through too much cold deserves a little warmth." Emily said nothing. She didn't explain that she was short on the electric bill, that she had split her dinner last night so Muffin, her one-eyed cat, would have something to nibble on, that she boiled water in a microwave yesterday because the tap had broken. But the man knew just by looking at her. As he stood to leave, he reached into his coat and pulled out something smaller weathered military ID tag, its chain rusted and placed it in her hand. "If I don't make it through this winter, at least someone will remember I was here." Then he left. No sound, no goodbye. Only a trail of rainwater on the floor, a still warm chair, and Emily's hand gripping the tag like it was a piece of history no one else remembered. She didn't know it then, but something in her had changed, and the world around her was about to change forever. The doorbell hadn't even finished ringing when a familiar voice thundered through the quiet diner like a clap of thunder. "Emily, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Rick Dawson, owner of Dawson's Diner, stormed into the center of the dining floor, his white shirt wrinkled, his apron barely tied. His face was flushed with anger, but his eyes were ice cold, as if he'd just witnessed an act of treason, not a meal handed to a starving veteran. Emily stood still. Her hand rested gently on her apron, the dog tag still tucked in her pocket. She knew what was coming, but the calm in her wasn't resignation. It was conviction, because she had no regrets. "How many times have I said this isn't a charity?" Rick barked, his voice echoing across the half-empty diner. A couple in the corner flinched. The woman leaned toward her husband and whispered, "See? That's what happens when you let strangers in." The man said nothing, just stirred his cold coffee, as if the rhythm of the spoon could mask the quiet agreement in his silence. "I pay you to serve customers, not play Mother Teresa to every stray that walks in," Rick growled, scanning the room for someone to back him up. But no one spoke. No one looked at Emily. No one looked at Rick. They disappeared into their phones, their menus, or their cowardice. Emily kept her voice even. "He's a veteran. He asked for hot water. The meal I gave him was a returned order. I paid for the coffee from my tips." Rick slammed the table. The sound cracked like a gunshot in a battle no one wanted to fight. "You just made me look weak in front of my customers. You had no right to decide that, and now—" He pointed toward the door. "You're fired. Get out." No one spoke. No one defended her. The same girl who brought coffee just the way they liked it, who remembered which customer wanted brown sugar or no onions on their sandwich, was now being cast out like a criminal. Emily untied her apron, folded it slowly, placed it on the counter. Her hands trembled, but her back stayed straight, just like her grandfather had taught her. Never bow your head even when they want you to break. As she turned to leave, her eyes met face after face. An old man looked away. A young man sank deeper into his phone. Another waitress, someone she'd worked beside for years, shrugged and averted her eyes. No one said, "You did the right thing." No one said, "Thank you for standing up." Outside, the rain still fell. But inside the diner, what poured down was colder than any storm. A silence heavy with indifference. Emily stepped out the door, canvas shoes instantly soaked. Her hair clung to her forehead, but her eyes were clear, steady, no tears, no bowed head, no pleading, because she knew, in a world that's grown far too used to turning away, choosing to hold on to kindness is an act of quiet defiance. And sometimes, the silence of a crowd speaks louder than 1,000 words. That night, Emily returned to the small room she rented behind the auto repair shop. Her clothes were soaked, and her canvas shoes let out a faint squish with every step across the warped wooden floor. She removed her apron, placed it on the chair, and sat quietly next to Muffin, her one-eyed cat, who gently nudged her arm, as if he somehow knew his owner had just gone through a day where no one stood up for her. The street lamp outside cast a dim light through the thin curtains, illuminating the water stains on the ceiling left behind by too many rainy seasons. Emily opened her phone and checked her bank balance. 42点12. She blinked. Rent was due in 10 days. No job, no health insurance, no backup plan. Only a fragile hope that tomorrow morning things would somehow be okay. What she didn't know was that the outside world was beginning to stir because of a 37-second video. A teenager sitting at a nearby table had captured the moment Rick Dawson yelled at her, finger pointing toward the door, while she stood still, eyes unwavering, gripping her apron like it held the last piece of her dignity. The video spread quickly online, but instead of compassion, many chose criticism. Rules are rules. She should have asked the manager first. Cheap heroics like that only get people fired. Who's to say this was the first time she gave food away? The cold comments snowballed into a wave of negativity. Old acquaintances began unfriending her. A former coworker sent a message, "You always wanted to be the good one at work. How's that working out for you now?" The next morning, Emily pulled her ponytail tight, put on the cleanest white shirt she had left, and applied to 3 different diners in town. At the first one, the manager, a middle-aged woman with a kind but weary look, glanced at the application, looked up, and sighed. "We can't hire someone that's attracting public attention right now. I hope you understand." And in the second place, they didn't let her finish the form. They quietly handed it back, offered a soft shake of the head, and motioned toward the door. No hostility, just fear of trouble. She stepped back out into the street. The pavement was still damp from last night's rain. Beneath her thin soles, the earth felt cold. In her jacket pocket was half a leftover sandwich from the night before, half for her, and half for the man in the faded uniform, if she saw him again. Emily sat down on the steps of an old church, long since closed. She rested her hands on her knees, wondering, if doing the right thing gets you cast out like this, then what does right even mean? But the answer didn't come from some philosophy book. It came from a memory. Her grandfather, sitting in his old rocking chair, once told her, "Kindness is a bridge you build, even if no one dares cross it. And sometimes, you don't get to turn back either." That morning, the sky over Ashbrook was clearer than it had been in days. The long night of rain left shimmering trails on the pavement, reflecting the first rays of sunlight that dared to break through the gloom. But the town didn't wake up because of the sunshine. It woke up because something was happening, something that had never happened before. At 6:45 a.m. sharp, the rumble of engines echoed from the far end of Main Street. Black SUVs, unmarked military vehicles, pickup trucks painted with American flags. They rolled in and stopped outside Dawson's Dinertha place, where Emily once worked. People poured out from shops, from the church, from upstairs apartments. They watched in stunned silence as nearly 200 uniformed service members, representing every branch Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, lined both sides of the diner's entrance. A silent corridor of respect surrounded a place that had once been filled only with indifference and cold stares. At the front stood a tall, broad-shouldered man. His insignia glinted in the morning light. Colonel Daniel Turner, 3-time Iraq veteran. He stepped inside the diner, removed his cap, and spoke with a calm, commanding voice. "I'd like to speak to the owner." Rick Dawson, now pale and visibly rattled, stepped out from behind the counter. I'm the owner. Is something wrong?" Colonel Turner locked eyes with him, not with anger, but with the quiet weight of something far deeper. "The man you threw out, the one that the waitress gave a meal to, was my father." The air seemed to freeze. A beat passed. No one moved. Turner reached into his pocket and pulled out a laminated document, a citation for the Silver Star, one of the U.S. military's highest honors. In 2007, in Fallujah, my convoy was ambushed. 12 soldiers were wounded, left behind a firewall of bullets and fire. One man ran 3 miles under direct fire to drag me back. He was shot in the leg, but refused medical attention until my entire unit was safe. He paused. That man was Eli Turner, the same man you called a beggar in the very country he bled to defend. Sergeant Harold Eli Turner, once a decorated U.S. Army soldier, had tried to transition to civilian life, but the battles in his mind never stopped. PTSD slowly wore him down, and after his wife passed, he lost his footing. Documents, benefits, coverage all slipped through cracks of bureaucracy, of relocations, of nights spent sleeping in city parks. No one had seen him in years. Until a 37-second video surfaced online. A waitress, unknown to the world, doing what no system had done. Recognizing him as a human being, Colonel Turner looked around. Hundreds of eyes were fixed on him. He said, "The woman you fired was the only one who saw my father. And today, we're not here to make noise. We're here to restore the dignity of someone who did the right thing when no one else would." Outside, the soldiers remained still. They didn't move. They didn't speak. They stood like a silent national anthem without music, without words, a line of honor. Not for a general, not for a hero in uniform, but for a girl who once stepped away from a cash register and delivered a hot meal to the place where humanity had quietly been forgotten. Back in her small rented room, Emily still had no idea what was unfolding. All she saw was a breathless reporter knocking at her door, her voice cracking through the morning wind. "They're waiting for you, a whole army, for a meal you gave without ever expecting anything in return." When Emily stepped down from the special shuttle sent by the Veterans Organization, she didn't walk into a ceremony. She walked into something deeper, a wave of quiet emotion, still and powerful, like a lake untouched by wind. 200 service members lined the sidewalk, hands raised in salute, eyes following her not with pity but with pure, unwavering respect. Colonel Turner stepped forward, holding a small black velvet box. He opened it. Inside was the Silver Star medal, the very one his father had once earned for bravery in battle, but had quietly pawned years ago to buy a meal for another homeless family. "My father wanted you to have this," Turner said, "because you reminded him that the country he once believed in still exists." Emily couldn't hold back her tears. Her hands trembled as she gently refused. I can't accept this. That was his medal, his sacrifice." But Colonel Turner smiled. "Yesterday, you sacrificed something too. Not blood, but your reputation, your job, your security, for kindness. And that deserves to be honored." In the week that followed, Dawson's Diner shut down for good. Vendors canceled contracts. Employee quitte. A for-lease sign hung over the front window just 1 week after the video went viral. As the people of Ashbrook slowly realized that their silence that day had made them complicit in something deeply wrong, Emily never gave a press statement, never wrote a social media post. She simply returned to her small room, placed the medal inside a wooden box next to the old dog tag and a faded photo of her grandfather. But this time, she wasn't alone. A nonprofit founded by veterans reached out to her. They were planning to open a community kitchen in Ashbrook inside an abandoned warehouse once used for broken vending machines, a place everyone had forgotten. And they wanted Emily to manage it. She could barely believe the offer. "I don't have a degree," she said. "I'm just a waitress." The organization's rep only smiled. "You were the only one who saw a man in a torn uniform as more than a burden. You don't need a degree for that. You need a heart. And you've already got it." Just a few weeks later, the lights in that warehouse flickered on. The smell of cornbread, slow-cooked chili, and fresh coffee filled the air, where a retired veteran chopped vegetables next to a single mother. A high school student rolled up his sleeves beside a retired nurse. No one asked where you came from, only how you wanted to help. And Emily, still in the same apron, now worn soft at the seam, stood at the heart of it all. No stage, no spotlight, just doing what she'd always done, giving, quietly, Sincerely. Each night after closing, she folded the American flag above the counter, placed it back in the wooden box with the medal, and whispered, "Grandpa, did I do okay?" That afternoon, the Ashbrook Community Kitchen was winding down after serving over 100 free meals. The pots were clean, the chairs stacked, the sound of laughter fading. Golden sunlight spilled through the doorway, dancing across the old tile floor. Emily was wiping the counter, preparing to lock up, when the soft chime of the front bell rang. She turned, and there stood a little girl, about 7 or 8, brown hair and pigtails, worn sneakers, holding a neatly folded paper bag and a $1 bill. The edges of the bill were torn, but it had been carefully kept clean. Her eyes were steady, not shy, just serious. She walked up to the counter, placed both items on the surface, and said clearly, "I saw you in the video. You gave a man food, even when no one said thank you. My grandpa was a soldier too. Mommy says he was very kind. So, I want to do something kind too. This is all my allowance. And these are cookies my mom made. Can you give them to someone who doesn't have food?" Emily stood still. The kitchen held its breath. She couldn't speak. Her hands, so used to trays and rags, could only clutch at her heart now, trembling from something too big for words. She knelt, looked the little girl in the eye, not as an adult to a child, but as someone who had once lost everything and was now being handed back hope by the purest heart in the room. She placed her hand over her chest, the same formal salute once given to her by 200 soldiers, and nodded. No grand gestures, no speeches, just a dollar all. The girl had, and the spark of kindness passed forward, like a quiet, steady flame. The girl smiled, turned, and walked away, leaving Emily alone in the kitchen that still smelled of cornbread and coffee. But now, her heart felt lighter than it had in years, because now she knew what she did that rainy day for a nameless soldier was still rippling outward, still alive. Just as her grandfather had once told her, honor doesn't need applause. It needs someone brave enough to do what's right, even if they stand alone. In a world where kindness is too often mistaken for weakness, where silence is easier than speaking out, Emily Carter's story reminds us, you don't need to be a hero to do the right thing. A hot plate, a knowing glance, a gentle word. It may seem small, but it might touch a soul long forgotten by the world. Eli Turner was not a famous name. He was just a soldier who gave quietly for his country and was left behind by the very society he'd served. But because of one simple act, without fanfare or expectation, he got to see his dignity restored. And the world was reminded that honor doesn't live in medals, but in how we treat those who have nothing left but their stories. You may not change the whole world, but you can always change someone's world with kindness, with courage, and with just a little faith. Have you ever witnessed a small act of kindness that made a big impact? Or maybe you've been on the receiving end of help just when you needed it most? Share your story in the comments, because who knows? Your words today might inspire someone tomorrow. If this story touched your heart, hit subscribe and tap the bell to join us in spreading good. Because sometimes it's the quietest acts that shake the world the loudest.